1F, Introduction to Percentages. Percentages, or percents, are represented with this symbol. That symbol means percent. Now, percent, if we break that into two pieces, per cent, cent, if you think of pennies in a dollar, there's 100 cents in a dollar. You can think of it that way, but cent means 100. So you're talking about per 100. So when we're talking about something in percents, we're talking about something per 100. So if we have 76%, you're really saying 76 per 100. So if 100 people were to take an exam and 76% of them passed the exam, then 76 out of that 100 passed the exam. So 76%, 76 per 100. So that's really what we're talking about when we're dealing with percents. And you can even write that as a ratio of 76 per 100. I kind of like this look because when you look at the percent sign, doesn't that look like a ratio or a fraction? This over that, 76 over 100. So that's what I really like about that, is I can kind of see it as that ratio or that fraction when we're talking about a percent. So when we're looking at percents, we're looking at this ratio in comparison to 100. Which means that we can write percents as something in terms of hundredths. So if we start with a percent, say 85%, we can convert that to a decimal, because that's 85 per 100, or 85 hundredths. 0.85, 85 hundredths, and that's 85%. 17%, 17 hundredths. So we can see that we can take a percent and represent it as a decimal. And I want to point out something with this, that if we have 85%, isn't there really, that's where a decimal point would be, wouldn't it? Or 17%. Decimal point would be right there. So when we're converting a percent to a decimal, we're really moving the decimal point to the left by 2 places, which is the equivalent of dividing by 100. So if we have a if we have a percent and we want to turn it into a decimal, we can just move the decimal point to the left by 2 places. So if I have 6% and I want to write that as a decimal, I can just say, well, there's the decimal point, but I'm going to move it 2 places to the left, which gives me 0.06. Isn't that pretty straightforward? We can just take a percent, move the decimal point 2 places to the left, and we have a decimal. Let's try another one. Make it a little more complicated. What if I have 5.7%, and I want to turn that into a decimal? Well, if I want to turn 5.7% into a decimal, I just need to move that decimal point over 2 places to the left. So I can say 0.057. as a decimal. Just remember when you're converting a percent to a decimal, do not write the percent sign over here, because that would still imply that this is over 100, which it is not, or being divided by 100. So when we go from a percent to a decimal, move that decimal point over 2 places and drop the percent sign. 431%. Well, wait, if we're talking about percent as being something over 100 or parts of 100, how can we have 431%? I can't have 431 out of 100, can I? Well, when we're dealing with percents, sometimes we relate things to 100, but we can have more than it. Let's say I was a very popular instructor. So popular that people actually came to my classes who weren't students in my class. Well, if everybody that was a student in my class came to class, I would have 100% of my students and 100% attendance. But if some extra people come to my class, then I would actually have over 100% of the people who are supposed to be in the room. And so we can have percentages that are higher than 100. So 431%, that just means we have more than the total amount expected. So 431%, if I want to turn that into a decimal, I'm going to do the same thing. There's my decimal point. I'm going to move it over 2 places to the left, and we now have 4.31. So let's look at 100% and see what that does. 100%, right? If I have 100%, I move that decimal point over, I get 1. If you have 100% of something, you have all of it. You have the whole thing. If I eat 100% of a cake, that means I ate one whole cake. If I ate 431% of a cake, that would mean I ate 4 cakes plus some more of it. So we can have larger portions than 100. If we have the whole amount, we have 1. If we have multiples of that, then we have higher than 1. So that's converting from percentages to decimals. We can also convert the other way, from decimals to percent. So let's say I have 0.61, and I want to convert that to a percent. Well, when you're converting from a percent to a decimal, you're dividing by 100. So you move that decimal point to the left 2 places. If you're converting from a decimal to a percent, then you're multiplying by 100. So you move the decimal point 2 places to the right. So if I have 0.61, then to convert it to a percent, I'm going to go 1, 2, move 2 places to the right, and I get 61, and now I put that percent sign, 61% or per 100. So 0.61 becomes 61%. If I have 0.372, I move the decimal point 2 places to the right, and I get 37.2%. If I have 0.04, move the decimal point 2 places to the right, 4%. Now be careful when you're going from a decimal to percent. Make sure that you put the percent symbol in there. Also, remember that your percents are always going to be larger numbers than the decimal equivalent. So whenever you're converting from a percent to a decimal or from a decimal to a percent, make sure that your percent is a larger number than the decimal form. 0.61, 61%. 0.372, 37.2%. The percent is always larger because the decimal comes from dividing the percent by 100. So let's do one more here before we finish. What if I have 5.78? So 5.78, and I want to convert that to a percent. I'm going to move that decimal point over 2 places to the right, which gives me 578%. So working with percentages, working with decimals, very similar. Converting between them, to go from a percent to a decimal, you move the decimal point 2 places to the right and drop the percent sign. To go from a decimal to a percent, 2 places to the left and drop the percent sign. And if you're going from a decimal to a percent, you move the decimal point 2 places to the right and add a percent sign.